Undercover owner visits his own bookstore, stops cold when he hears two young boys behind. The bell above the door of Chapter and Charm jingled softly as Nathan Carter stepped inside, his heart quickening at the familiar scent of paper, leather, and the subtle hint of cinnamon from the small cafe corner. It had been a year since he'd walked through these doors, a year filled with distant cities, foreign bookshops, and the kind of solitude that both mends and hollows a man. He adjusted his glasses, non-prescription lenses framed by thick black rims, and ran a hand over his newly grown beard. The disguise wasn't elaborate, but combined with his casual clothes and worn messenger bag, it was enough. Nathan Carter, the reserved yet passionate owner of Boston's most beloved independent bookstore, was now just another browsing customer. "Can I help you find anything?" asked a young woman with a purple streak in her hair and a Chapter and Charm name tag reading Zoe. "Just browsing, thanks," Nathan replied, lowering his voice slightly. He watched as Zoe nodded and moved on to help another customer, no recognition in her eyes. Nathan felt an odd mixture of relief and disappointment. Zoe must be new. Before his sabbatical, Nathan had prided himself on knowing every employee by name, their reading preferences, their dreams. The bookstore wasn't just his livelihood, it was the family he built after losing his parents. And at the center of that family had always been Mara. Nathan weaved through the aisles, taking in the changes. The travel section had been expanded, smart move, given the post-pandemic wanderlust. The old oak reading chairs had been reupholstered in rich emerald green. The children's corner had new murals of classics like "Where the Wild Things Are" and "The Very Hungry Caterpillar." Everything looked perfect. Exactly as he'd expect Mara to maintain it, perhaps even better. After 15 years as his right hand, Mara knew the soul of Chapter and Charm as intimately as he did. The sound of a familiar laugh drew his attention toward the register. There she was, Mara Chin, her sleek black hair now styled in a chin-length bob with strands of silver she hadn't bothered to dye. She was demonstrating something on the point-of-sale system to a new employee, her gestures animated, her smile warm. Nathan ducked behind a display of bestsellers, suddenly feeling like an intruder in his own kingdom. The plan had seemed so reasonable in theory: return quietly, observe operations for a week before revealing himself, get a genuine sense of how things ran without the artificial polish that would inevitably come with the boss's return. Now, watching Mara point out something on the screen with the confident air of ownership, Nathan wondered if his plan was driven less by practical business concerns and more by a lingering fear that perhaps Chapter and Charm had learned to thrive without him. He wandered toward the quieter back corner where rare first editions were kept in glass cases. The inventory appeared impeccable, each book displayed with a small card detailing its significance, condition, and price. Nathan bent to examine a leather-bound collection of Dickens that hadn't been there before his departure. The asking price made him raise his eyebrows. Ambitious, but not unreasonable for such a fine set. The soft shuffle of small feet made him straighten up. Two boys, perhaps 9 or 10 years old, had appeared nearby. One had a mop of curly red hair and freckles scattered across his nose. The other was taller with close-cropped black hair and serious eyes. They were huddled over a large illustrated book about dinosaurs, whispering to each other with the conspiratorial air unique to children sharing secrets. Nathan smiled to himself. This was why he'd opened Chapter and Charm, to create a space where literature breathed, where children could discover worlds between pages. He turned back to the display case, giving the boys their privacy. "We saw her stealing again yesterday," one of the boys whispered, his voice just loud enough to reach Nathan's ears. "But she's your favorite, so I didn't want to say anything." Nathan froze, his hand hovering over the glass case. "She's not my favorite," the second boy replied defensively. "I just said she's nice to us. But yeah, I saw it too. The book had a weird symbol on it. Looked super old. And she didn't scan it or anything. Just put it in that special bag she keeps under the counter." Nathan's throat tightened. He pretended to browse while straining to hear more, careful not to alert the boys to his eavesdropping. "My dad says stealing is always wrong," the red-headed boy declared with childish certainty. Even if you're nice? Asked his friend. Especially if you're nice. Because then people trust you more. The taller boy sighed. But Miss Mara knows all the best dragon books. And she gave me that bookmark for free last time. Nathan's pulse quickened. They were talking about Mara. Mara, who had stayed late countless nights helping him build inventory systems. Mara, who had covered the rent on the store for 3 months during the pandemic before the relief loans came through. Mara, whose integrity he would have vouched for with his life. Maybe we should tell someone, the redhead suggested. Who? She's the boss while the real owner is away. My mom says there's always someone to tell when bad stuff happens. The conversation drifted as the boys became absorbed in a particularly impressive illustration of a Tyrannosaurus. Nathan stood frozen, unsure whether to dismiss what he'd heard as childish imagination or to take it seriously. Children often misinterpreted adult actions, saw mystery where there was mundane explanation. Yet something in their earnest whispers lodged in Nathan's mind like a splinter. He glanced toward the front of the store where Mara was now expertly gift-wrapping a book, chatting easily with a customer as her fingers created perfect corners and creases. Nothing in her demeanor suggested anything but the consummate professional he'd always known. Nathan had planned to reveal himself tomorrow, to surprise Mara and the staff with his early return. But now, a different plan began forming in his mind. He needed to know, was there any truth to what those boys had said? Or was it just the innocent misunderstanding of children? He moved casually toward the children's section, selecting a novel aimed at middle-grade readers, and settled into one of the small chairs. From this vantage point, he could observe the store operations while appearing to be simply another customer lost in a book. As the afternoon light slanted through the tall windows, casting golden rectangles across the hardwood floors, Nathan found himself reading the same page over and over, his mind churning. Could Mara, the person he trusted above all others with his life's work, be betraying that trust? The thought felt like blasphemy. Yet those boys had spoken with such innocent certainty. Nathan watched as Mara worked the floor, recommending books with genuine enthusiasm, troubleshooting a register issue, stepping in when a customer became irate about a special order delay. She was everything a manager should be, efficient, kind, knowledgeable. But twice, he noticed her disappear into the back room for brief periods, returning with a slightly different posture, shoulders more tense, eyes darting. Could be nothing, inventory checks, personal calls, any number of innocent explanations. Or it could be something else entirely. As closing time approached, Nathan reluctantly prepared to leave. Tomorrow, he would return, still in disguise, and watch more carefully. He would find those boys again and gently ask what they'd seen. The idea of spying on Mara made him sick to his stomach. But the alternative, ignoring warning signs and potentially putting Chapter and Charm at risk, was unthinkable. Nathan joined the small stream of customers heading for the exit. As he passed the register, Mara looked up and smiled politely at him, the same smile she gave every customer. "Find everything you needed?" she asked, her voice warm and familiar. For a fleeting second, Nathan nearly broke character, nearly confessed everything. Instead, he nodded and mumbled a thanks, hurrying past before his face could betray him. Outside, the cool evening air filled his lungs. Nathan stood on the sidewalk, looking back at the illuminated storefront with its cheerful window displays and the hand-painted sign he'd commissioned from a local artist when he first opened. Chapter and Charm had been his dream, his sanctuary, his purpose. Now, for the first time, he wondered if it might also harbor secrets he wasn't prepared to discover. Nathan returned to Chapter and Charm the next morning, arriving just as the doors opened. He ordered a coffee from the small cafe corner and settled into a spot with a clear view of the main floor. His disguise remained intact. The barista had even written Nick on his cup after mishearing his mumbled fake name. Mara arrived 10 minutes later, bringing an immediate energy to the space. Staff straightened up, customers gravitated toward her, and the entire atmosphere shifted. She moved through the store like a conductor leading an orchestra, each gesture purposeful yet flowing. "Good morning, everyone!" Mara's voice carried the perfect blend of authority and warmth. "Lisa, the new shipment of poetry collections needs unpacking. Devin, remember we have the author signing at 3. Make sure the display is ready by noon." Nathan watched, impressed despite his new reservations. This was exactly why he'd promoted Mara from bookseller to manager within her first year, why he'd gradually entrusted her with increasing responsibility until she became the store's beating heart. When his mother died 2 years ago and he'd fallen into a grief-stricken fog, Mara had kept Chapter and Charm not just functioning but thriving. "She's basically family," he had told his sister when explaining his decision to take a sabbatical. "If anyone can run the place as well as I can, it's Mara." Now, hiding behind his coffee cup, Nathan tried to reconcile that Mara with the one potentially implicated by 2 young boys' whispers. Around mid-morning, the boys appeared. They made a beeline for the adventure section, the taller one leading while the redhead followed, clutching what looked like allowance money in his small fist. Nathan casually moved closer, pretending to browse nearby shelves. "Morning, troublemakers," Mara called out, winking at the boys as she passed with an armful of books. "Tommy, did you finish that dragon book already?" The taller boy, Tommy, nodded enthusiastically. "It was awesome! Are there any more like it? I've got something special coming in next week. I'll set one aside for you." Mara's smile was genuine, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Thanks, Miss Mara," both boys chorused. Nathan frowned. If Mara was doing something unethical, she certainly didn't behave like a guilty person around potential witnesses. Throughout the day, Nathan observed Mara handling a dozen small crises with grace: a customer disputing a charge, a coffee spill threatening a display, a delivery arriving hours early. She knew every employee's strengths, every regular customer's preferences, every operational detail of the business. "Maybe I imagine significance in innocent children's talk," he thought. Then, shortly after lunch, Nathan noticed something odd. A customer in an expensive suit approached Mara, slipped her a business card, and whispered something. Mara's expression didn't change, but she nodded almost imperceptibly and tucked the card into her pocket rather than the business card holder at the register. 20 minutes later, Mara disappeared into the stockroom. When she emerged, she was carrying a sealed brown paper package that she handed to the suited customer, who had lingered near the history section. No registered transaction occurred. The package changed hands along with what looked like a handshake, though Nathan couldn't be certain if something else passed between palms. "What's wrong, sir?" Nathan startled at the voice beside him. Tommy stood there, looking up with curious eyes. "Nothing," Nathan replied quickly. "Just thinking." "You're new here," Tommy observed. "I'm Tommy and that's Eli," he added, pointing to his red-headed friend examining a book nearby. "Nice to meet you. I'm Nick." Tommy studied him with surprising intensity for a child. "You look sad. Is it because of the stealing?" Nathan's heart skipped. "What's stealing?" Tommy glanced around and lowered his voice. "Miss Mara takes books sometimes. Special ones with weird symbols or really old covers. She puts them in packages like that one." He nodded toward where the suited customer was now exiting the store. "Are you sure?" Nathan asked carefully. Eli joined them, clutching a book about knights. "We saw her 3 times, he reported matter-of-factly. "Once with a really old red book with gold letters. Once with a whole stack of thin books in plastic. And yesterday with one that had a black cover with stars." Nathan felt sick. Those descriptions matched several valuable items from his rare book collection: a first-edition Hemingway, a series of limited chapbooks from a local poet, and a 19th-century illustrated astronomy text. "Maybe she's just moving them," he suggested weakly. Both boys shook their heads with the absolute certainty of childhood. "She looks different when she does it," Tommy explained. "All sneaky. And she never uses the beepy machine," Eli added, mimicking the motion of scanning a barcode. That evening, after the boys had left with their purchases and the store was quieting for closing, Nathan accessed the store's public computer terminal. He navigated to the Chapter and Charm website, clicked the About page, and studied the staff photos, particularly his own. The beard and glasses worked. He hardly recognized himself. Then he clicked on the rare and collectible inventory page. Several items were listed as sold that he distinctly remembered being in the locked case the day before his departure. Items that would require his personal approval to sell. Items that, according to the financial portal he discreetly accessed with his owner credentials, had no corresponding sales records. Nathan watched as Mara moved around the store, turning off reading lamps and straightening displays. Her movements were precise, her expression serene. No one watching would see anything but dedication. As she passed near the computer, she glanced at the screen displaying the rare books page. For a split second, something flashed across her face: awareness, calculation, something cold that didn't belong in the warm personality he'd known for 15 years. Then it was gone, replaced by her usual smile as she asked, "Finding everything all right? We're closing in 15 minutes. Just browsing," Nathan mumbled, quickly switching to a different tab. "Take your time," she said kindly, but her eyes lingered on him a moment longer than necessary before she moved on. Nathan felt a chill that had nothing to do with the store's air conditioning. The boys had been right. Something was very wrong at Chapter and Charm, and it centered on the person he trusted most in the world. The next morning, Nathan arrived at Chapter and Charm just after opening, his mind made up. He needed more than suspicions and a child's observations. He needed proof. He found Tommy and Eli in their usual spot by the adventure books, heads bent over a graphic novel. "Good morning, boys," Nathan said, settling into a nearby chair with a book he had no intention of reading. "Hi, Mr. Nick," Tommy said, glancing up. Eli offered a small wave. "I was thinking about what you told me yesterday," Nathan began carefully. "About Miss Mara and the books." The boys exchanged looks. "We're not supposed to tell," Eli whispered, his freckles standing out against suddenly pale skin. "Grown-ups don't believe kids anyway." "I believe you," Nathan assured them. "And I want to help. But I need to know exactly what you saw." Tommy hesitated, then leaned forward. "We were playing hide and seek last Thursday. I was hiding in the stockroom. Even though we're not supposed to," Eli interjected with the air of someone who had pointed this out before. "And I saw Miss Mara with 3 books from the glass case. The one with the lock? She was putting them in a box, but not a normal box. It was black with no writing on it. She locked it with a little key she keeps on that necklace she always wears," Eli added. "The one with the bird charm." Nathan nodded. He knew the necklace well, a silver raven pendant he'd given Mara for her 10th work anniversary. "Did you see what happened to the box?" Nathan asked. "A man came at night," Tommy said. "We were at the after-hours book club with my mom. She works next door at the cafe and sometimes we wait here. Miss Mara didn't know we were watching from the kids' fort. He had a van," Eli said importantly. "Dark blue. No words on it. And Miss Mara gave him the box. He gave her an envelope. Then they talked for a long time, looking at another book together." This was far more detailed than Nathan had expected. The boys weren't just observant, they were inadvertent witnesses to what sounded increasingly like a black market operation. "Thank you for telling me," Nathan said sincerely. "You're very brave. Are you going to tell the police?" Eli asked, eyes wide. Nathan's stomach dropped. He hadn't even considered that endpoint yet, Mara in handcuffs, led from the store she'd helped build. "I don't know yet," he answered honestly. "First, I need to be absolutely sure." After the boys left with promises to keep their conversations secret, Nathan made his move. He knew the store's camera system had been upgraded the previous year. He'd approved the expense himself. The security console was located in his office, which Mara now occupied. He waited until she was thoroughly engaged with a visiting author, then slipped behind the counter and through the staff-only door. The back hallway led past the stockroom to the small office. The door was closed but unlocked. Nathan entered and closed the door behind him. The office had changed. More plants, different artwork, a more organized filing system. But the security monitor still sat on the corner desk, quietly recording footage from cameras throughout the store. He accessed the system using his old password. It still worked, and began reviewing footage from the past week. The timestamp feature made it easy to locate after-hours activity. Sure enough, Thursday night showed Mara escorting a tall man in a leather jacket to the rear entrance. The camera angle didn't capture the actual handoff, but their body language suggested a transaction rather than a friendly chat. Nathan searched the office methodically, looking for any evidence of these off-book sales. The computer records showed nothing unusual. Mara was too smart for that. The filing cabinet contained only standard paperwork. He was about to give up when he noticed something odd about the antique bookshelf against the far wall, the one he'd installed himself to hold reference materials and industry guides. The copy of Rare Book Collecting for Dealers sat slightly askew. Nathan pulled it out. Behind it was a slim, leather-bound journal. With trembling hands, he opened it. Inside were meticulous entries in Mara's neat handwriting. F.E. Hemingway, Fair, $14,500 BK 30% Plath chapbooks, complete, $8,900 BK 30% Audubon, damaged spine, $22,000 BK 35%. The entries continued, each with similar notations. Nathan recognized the titles. All rare books that should have been in Chapter and Charm's collection. Each entry included a price far above what was listed in the store's official inventory, followed by what appeared to be a commission percentage. The final pages contained contact information disguised as a supplier list, with initials and phone numbers. One set of initials appeared repeatedly, BK. Nathan photographed several pages with his phone before replacing the journal exactly as he'd found it. His heart pounded so loudly he was certain someone would hear it. The evidence was undeniable now. Mara was selling valuable books from his collection through a black market dealer, taking a hefty commission on each sale. But why? Her salary was generous. The store provided health insurance and retirement benefits. She had even been named in his will to inherit a percentage of the business should anything happen to him. As he carefully closed the office door behind him, Nathan spotted a small plaque he hadn't noticed on the way in. It was displayed prominently on the wall beside the door. "A book is a dream you hold in your hand." Neil Gaiman. He remembered when Mara had quoted those words to him during her interview 15 years ago. Her passion for literature had been palpable, her integrity seemingly beyond question. The plaque now seemed to mock him, a facade hiding the betrayal beneath. Nathan returned to the main floor just as Mara was concluding the author event. She caught his eye across the room and smiled warmly. He forced himself to smile back, the secret ledger's figures burning in his mind. The foundation of trust that had supported their 15-year relationship was crumbling beneath his feet, leaving nothing but questions in its wake. That night, Nathan made 2 calls, one to a private security firm that specialized in retail theft, and another to James Winters, a former employee who had left to pursue rare book authentication. The trap was about to be set. 3 days later, Nathan's plan was in motion. The security firm had installed additional hidden cameras covering the blind spots in the store's existing system. They focused particularly on the rare book section, the stockroom, and the back entrance. James Winters arrived at Chapter and Charm shortly after lunch, dressed in an immaculate suit with an antique pocket watch chain visible, the perfect picture of a wealthy collector. Nathan, still in his disguise, positioned himself near the poetry section with a clear view of the rare books area. "May I help you?" Mara approached James with her signature warm smile. "I hope so," James replied, his voice carrying just the right blend of entitlement and enthusiasm. "I'm looking for something special. Bernard Kennedy suggested I speak with you directly." Nathan watched Mara's face carefully. The name, which matched the BK initials from the ledger, triggered an almost imperceptible change in her expression. Her smile remained, but her eyes sharpened, calculating. "Mr. Kennedy has excellent taste," she said carefully. "What sort of item interests you?" "Hemingway. First editions. I understand you occasionally have inventory that doesn't make it to the public shelves. Mara's gaze swept the store, lingering briefly on Nathan, who quickly looked down at his book. Something must have satisfied her, because she gestured for James to follow her to the office. Nathan slipped into the stockroom where the security firm had set up a small monitoring station. On the screen, he could see Mara leading James into the office and closing the door. Thanks to the new camera, he could both see and hear what transpired. I don't normally do this during business hours, Mara was saying, her voice now missing its usual warmth. Kennedy should have told you to call first. My apologies, James replied smoothly. I'm only in town for the day. He spoke very highly of your discretion. Mara studied him for a moment, then nodded. Wait here. She left the office, and Nathan quickly returned to the sales floor, pretending to browse. He watched as Mara went to the rare books case, unlocked it with her key, and selected a volume. Instead of taking it directly back to the office, she carried it to the stockroom. Minutes later, she returned to the office. The camera showed her presenting a book to James, a first edition of Hemingway's A Farewell to Arms. Its distinctive cover unmistakable even on the grainy security feed. $7,500, Mara said flatly. James examined the book carefully. The market value is closer to $14,000. Then pay $14,000 somewhere else, Mara replied with a shrug. Mine is $7,500 cash, no questions, no paperwork. How do I know it's authentic? Mara handed him a loop. Check the binding, the copyright page. You'll see it's genuine. I don't deal in fakes. James made a show of examining the book. All right. $7,500. But I need a receipt for insurance purposes. No receipts, Mara said firmly. That's the point. This book officially doesn't exist in our inventory. Because it's already been sold? Or because it was never recorded? Mara's eyes narrowed. Does it matter? You get a first edition Hemingway at half the market price. I get cash. Kennedy gets his cut. Everyone's happy. Except the actual owner of this bookstore, James said, his voice hardening. For the first time, Mara looked uncertain. Excuse me? In the stockroom, Nathan texted a prearranged signal to the security team. Within moments, 2 plainclothes officers entered the store, making their way casually toward the back office. On screen, James was still speaking. This is theft, Ms. Chin. Plain and simple. I don't know who you are, Mara said, reaching for the book. But this conversation is over. I agree, said a new voice, Nathan's own, no longer disguised. He had entered the office behind her, removing his fake glasses. It is over, Mara. The color drained from her face. Nathan? You're back early. Her eyes darted between him and James, realization dawning. You set me up. You set yourself up, Nathan replied, his voice tight with emotion. I've seen the ledger. I know about Kennedy. Those boys saw you, Mara. Children saw what you were doing. What boys? She asked, momentarily confused. Tommy and Eli. They watched you smuggling books out the back door. They saw the man with the van. Mara's composure cracked. You don't understand. Then help me understand, Nathan pleaded, genuine pain in his voice. Why would you do this? After everything we've built together? The security officers entered the office, standing silently by the door. Mara's shoulders slumped. My sister, she whispered. The medical bills, they kept piling up. The insurance wouldn't cover the experimental treatment. I needed money, lots of it, quickly. You could have come to me, Nathan said, his voice breaking. You know I would have helped. You were gone. Taking your sabbatical, finding yourself. Mara snapped, bitterness creeping into her voice. Meanwhile, Lisa was dying. Kennedy approached me about a rare volume. It seemed like a sign. Just one book, no one would miss it. But then Lisa needed more treatments and it became easier each time. Nathan finished for her. Mara nodded, tears streaming down her face. I told myself I'd pay it all back someday. That I was just borrowing against my future inheritance of the store. Nathan felt physically ill. The justifications, the calculations, this wasn't a momentary lapse but a systematic betrayal spanning months. How much? He asked quietly. In total, how much have you taken? Mara stared at the floor. Just over 300,000. The figure hit Nathan like a physical blow. No wonder the store's profits had seemed slightly lower than projected despite strong sales. A significant portion of their most valuable inventory had simply vanished. Is your sister at least better? He asked, grasping for any silver lining. Mara's face crumpled. She died 2 months ago. The treatments didn't work. The officers stepped forward. One of them spoke quietly. Ms. Chin, we need you to come with us now. As they led Mara away, she looked back at Nathan, her face a mask of regret and defiance. I did what I had to do, she said. For family. You of all people should understand that. Nathan stood in the suddenly silent office, surrounded by the ruins of a friendship he had valued above almost all else. On the desk lay the Hemingway First Edition, one of dozens of stolen books he might never recover. The sting had worked perfectly. The truth was exposed. So why did victory feel so hollowly like defeat? News of Mara's arrest spread through Chapter and Charm like wildfire. By closing time, the staff huddled in confused, whispering groups. Regular customers sensed the tension, their concerned glances meeting averted eyes. Nathan, no longer in disguise, gathered everyone in the reading circle after turning the open sign to closed. As most of you know by now, Mara Chin was arrested today, he began, his voice steadier than he felt. I'm Nathan Carter, the owner of Chapter and Charm. I've been away on sabbatical, but I've returned early and undercover. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the group. Mara has been stealing valuable books from our collection and selling them on the black market. Nathan continued. The evidence is substantial and, unfortunately, undeniable. That's impossible, cried Lisa, a longtime bookseller who had been hired by Mara. She loved this place. She loved these books. She also loved her sister, Nathan said quietly, who was dying of cancer and needed expensive treatments. This revelation silenced the room. Many staff members had met Mara's sister during her healthier days, when she would visit the store bearing homemade cookies or help decorate for holiday events. Does that make it right? Asked Devon, the newest employee. She still stole from all of us. This place could have gone under. The staff fractured into heated debate, some defending Mara's desperate choices, others feeling personally betrayed. Nathan let them talk, watching as the community he'd built processed this fundamental breach of trust. When the conversation finally ebbed, Nathan spoke again. I understand everyone has feelings about this. Take tomorrow off, paid day. We'll reopen the day after with adjusted schedules. I'm back now, and we'll get through this together. As the staff dispersed, Nathan retreated to the office, his office again now, and collapsed into the chair. The hidden ledger lay open before him, each entry a knife twist. He had already spoken with the police, providing a detailed statement, and arranging to meet with them again tomorrow to discuss recovering the stolen merchandise. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Mr. Carter? It was Tommy and Eli, standing hesitantly in the doorway, accompanied by a woman Nathan assumed was one of their mothers. Boys, Nathan managed a tired smile. And Janet Miller, the woman supplied. Tommy's mom. The boys told me everything. I'm sorry about your manager. Nathan nodded. Thank you for coming by. We saw them take Miss Mara away, Eli said, his eyes wide. In a police car. Are we in trouble? Tommy asked. For telling? Absolutely not, Nathan assured them, kneeling to meet their eyes. You did exactly the right thing. You saw something wrong and spoke up about it. But Miss Mara was nice, Eli insisted. She always helped us find the best books. Sometimes, Nathan said carefully, good people make bad choices. especially when they're scared or trying to help someone they love. Like her sister, Tommy said. The boys had clearly been listening to the staff discussion. Yes. But that doesn't make stealing right. The boys considered this, their young faces solemn with the weight of this moral complexity. Will she go to jail forever? Eli asked. I don't know, Nathan answered honestly. That's for the courts to decide. After the boys and Janet left, Nathan remained alone in the store. Night fell, casting long shadows across the shelves. He walked through the aisles, trailing his fingers along book spines, reacquainting himself with his life's work. When he reached the rare books section, the empty spaces in the display cases seemed to accuse him. How had he missed the signs? Had his need for escape after his mother's death blinded him to Mara's desperation? His phone rang, the district attorney's office. They wanted to meet tomorrow to discuss charges. They were talking grand larceny, fraud, betrayal of fiduciary duty. Terms that would define the rest of Mara's life. Nathan agreed to the meeting and hung up, his heart heavy. Then he dialed another number. Hello? Mara's voice sounded small through the phone. It's me, Nathan said. I used my one call to contact your attorney, she explained. He arranged bail. Silence stretched between them, 15 years of friendship collapsing into this single, strained moment. Why didn't you just ask me for help? Nathan finally asked, the question that had tortured him for days. You were finding yourself in Europe. Mara's voice turned bitter. While Lisa was dying by inches. I wouldn't beg. So you decided to steal instead. I decided to save my sister by any means necessary, Mara countered. And I'd do it again. $300,000, Mara. Books that can never be replaced. And none of it mattered in the end, she whispered, her voice breaking. She still died. Nathan closed his eyes, feeling the weight of her grief and his own sense of betrayal. The DA wants to make an example of you, he said. High-value theft, breach of trust. They're talking about serious prison time. Are you calling to gloat? Mara asked sharply. I'm calling to tell you I've hired you an excellent lawyer, Nathan replied. And to let you know I'll be there. At your hearings. Every day. Why would you do that? Mara sounded genuinely confused. Because despite everything, you're still family, Mara. And I wasn't there when you needed me before. I'm not making that mistake again. Tears welled in Nathan's eyes as he stood in the darkened bookstore, surrounded by thousands of stories, none as painful as the one unfolding in his own life. I'll never forgive you for this, he said softly. But I'll never abandon you either. The next morning, as news of the scandal broke in local media, customers gathered outside Chapter and Charm, their shocked whispers filling the sidewalk. The store remained closed, its heart removed, its future uncertain. Inside, Nathan began the painful process of rebuilding from betrayal. 3 months later, Chapter and Charm reopened with a celebration that filled the store and spilled onto the sidewalk outside. New inventory gleamed on polished shelves. Fresh paint brightened the walls. A completely redesigned rare books section featured a state-of-the-art security system with motion sensors and tamper-proof display cases. Nathan stood at the center of it all, greeting customers and directing his newly expanded staff. The scandal had initially threatened to ruin the bookstore's reputation, but Nathan had turned crisis into opportunity. He'd been transparent with the community, sharing both his heartbreak and his vision for rebuilding. That honesty had resonated, transforming potential disaster into a story of resilience. Quite a turnout, remarked James Winters, now Chapter and Charm's rare books curator. Who would have thought a bookstore scandal would bring in more business? People love redemption stories, Nathan replied, watching a group of college students browse the poetry section. And they appreciate knowing exactly where they stand with the business. The new management structure was completely transparent. Financial reports were shared quarterly with all full-time staff. Inventory decisions became collaborative. Nathan had installed additional security cameras throughout the store, but he'd done so openly, explaining their purpose to his team rather than hiding them. Trust through transparency. As Nathan had written in the store's new employee handbook. We've learned the hard way what happens when secrets take root. A small commotion near the entrance caught his attention. Tommy and Eli had arrived, accompanied by Tommy's mother Janet and another woman who must be Eli's mom. The boys raced through the door, making a beeline for Nathan. "Mr. Nathan! Is it really ready?" Tommy asked, practically bouncing with excitement. "See for yourself." Nathan grinned, leading the small procession toward the children's section. The transformation was dramatic. What had once been a simple corner with beanbag chairs and low shelves had expanded into a magical space. Hand-painted murals depicted scenes from classic children's literature, a wardrobe opening into a snowy forest, a spider web with the words, "Some pig," woven into it, a boy flying through stars toward a distant island. In the center hung a wooden sign with careful lettering. Tommy and Eli's corner for the young heroes who saved our store with courage and truth. The boys stared in awe, their eyes wide. "This is really for us?" Eli whispered. "You two saw something wrong and spoke up about it," Nathan said, kneeling down to their level. "That takes real courage. This store might not be here without you." Janet dabbed at her eyes. "I've never been prouder," she said, placing a hand on Tommy's shoulder. "We've also created this," Nathan continued, presenting each boy with an embossed card. "Lifetime membership to our new Young Readers Detective Club. Free books for life, plus first access to all new releases in your age group." The boys clutched their cards like golden tickets, their faces glowing with pride. As the crowd dispersed to enjoy the refreshments, Nathan slipped away to the quiet of his office. On his desk sat a stack of letters, correspondence from his attorney regarding Mara's case. The prosecution had ultimately offered a plea deal, 2 years in a minimum security facility, followed by probation and community service. With good behavior, she might be out in 14 months. Nathan had written to her weekly since her sentencing. She hadn't responded to a single letter. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Devon, his newly promoted assistant manager, entered with a tablet. "Final draft of your book proposal," Devon said, setting the tablet on the desk. "The publisher is excited about it." Nathan glanced at the title page on the screen. "The Bookstore That Almost Betrayed Me, Lessons in Trust, Transparency, and Resilience," by Nathan Carter. "Thanks," Nathan said. "I'll review it tonight." After Devon left, Nathan opened his desk drawer and removed a photograph, himself and Mara at the store's 10th anniversary celebration, both beaming with pride. He placed it beside the tablet, 2 versions of his life's work in stark contrast. The door opened again, this time without a knock. Tommy poked his head in. "Mr. Nathan? We're starting the reading circle. Everyone's waiting." "I'll be right there," Nathan promised. As he left his office, Nathan paused to adjust the new plaque he'd hung beside the door. "In the end, we'll all become stories." Margaret Atwood. Chapter and Charm had become a different story than he'd ever imagined, one with betrayal and heartbreak, but also with unexpected heroes and second chances. The young boys who had saved his store with their innocent observations had also saved something in Nathan himself. They'd reminded him why he'd opened a bookstore in the first place, to create a space where stories could transform lives. Every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon now featured the Young Detectives Book Club, where Tommy and Eli led other children in discussions about mystery novels. Nathan often sat in, marveling at their enthusiasm and insight. The community reading program had expanded beyond his wildest expectations. Local schools brought classes for monthly visits. Senior centers organized weekly reading groups in the store's cafe. As Nathan took his place in the reading circle, surrounded by eager faces both young and old, he realized that the story of Chapter and Charm wasn't ending. It was simply beginning a new chapter. One written with the wisdom of hard lessons and the hope that comes from starting again. "Today," he announced, opening a book to its first page, "we're starting a story about trust, betrayal, and ultimately, redemption." The audience settled in, ready to listen, ready to imagine, ready to believe. And in that moment, surrounded by books and believers, Nathan knew that despite everything, he had found his way home.